লাগাম দিও তো না মারামারি করবে আসো আসো হ্যালো হ্যালো জনগণ সবাই শোনো দিয়ে মন আমি এসেছি আমাকে দেখাতে হাই হিরো আলম এটা বুড়িদের জন্য একটা হিরো হতে গেলে তো আপনার জানেন একটা হিরো হতে গেলে স্মার্ট হতে হয় অনেক লেখাপড়া থাকতে হয় হ্যান্ডসাম হতে হয় ডিশের ব্যবসা করছে ডিশ আলম পরিচিত সিটি আলম পরিচিত আলম থেকে হিরো আলম আমি কি করলাম আমি কি করলাম ঈদ মোবারক ঈদ মোবারক ঈদ মোবারক আপনি কোয়ালিটি ভালো না সে দেখতে ভালো না তার কাজ ভালো না আর আমি যে কন্টেন্ট গুলো তৈরি করতেছি ওই কন্টেন্ট গুলো একদম নর্মাল লো কোয়ালিটি কি নির্বাচন করবে হিরো আলমের কি যোগ্যতা আছে এমপি নির্বাচন করতে পারে হিরো আলমের কিছুদিন পরে আবার মীমাংসা করে মামলা উঠে গেল আরে বউ মেয়েদের বিয়ে হলে একদিন স্বামীর সাথে যাইতে হয় হিরো আলম আমাকে গান কবি তাদেরই গোতে পাবে আতুমা আপা আদু আমিল ইল্লিসু I believe that the heart does go on. আমি সোজা পথে চলি বুক বলে কথা বলি তবে চ্যালেঞ্জ করলে করব খতম সবাই খালি ইনসালি করছে কিন্তু আমার ভেতরতে আমি সাহস হারাইনি ঠিক আছে কারো দরকার নেই এটা আমার বিরুদ্ধে একটা ষড়যন্ত্র করে আমাকে আমার জনপ্রিয়তাটা হেয় করার জন্য অনেকেই আমার পেছনে মানে উঠে পড়ে লেগেছে আমার বলছে আমার হলো যে গেট আপ মেকআপ আপনি লুক মানে হিরো পছন্দ না হিরো নামটা চেঞ্জ করতে হবে যে আমি কোনো হিরো নাম কেন চেঞ্জ করবো? তুই না হিরো নাম কেন রাখছিস? তুই নজরুল সঙ্গীত কেন গাইছিস? তারপর রবীন্দ্র সঙ্গীত কেন গাইছিস? তারপরে তো পুলিশের পোশাক পরছিস কেন? মানে এক এক রকম প্রশ্ন, তার শেষ নেই। এত ইনসাল্ট করেন কেন আমারে? আমার তো কোনো অপরাধ ছিল না।
আমার কি হবে গো, জেল হবে না ফাঁসি হবে।
বগুড়ার পোলা, বগুড়ার পোলা, বগুড়ার পোলা হিরো আলম, বগুড়ার পোলা হিরো আলম।
A very like famous, not a famous thing, a very common thing that keeps on recurring in most of the videos and the comments that I've seen is basically our culture is not what it used to be. It's like a familiar anxiety that resurfaces whenever a figure like Hero Alom gains mass visibility. Now, Alom's viral presence marked by over-the-top performances and self-fashioned celebrity status unsettles the carefully maintained boundaries of Bengaliness, a term that, despite its seeming naturalness, is a historically constructed identity rooted in Bhattacharya sensibilities and colonial modernity. Here, I'll keep on referring to this one term called Bhattacharya, and just to give you a proper reference, it refers to the upper class, upper caste, Bengali people. So, yeah, and so like a rough translation would be gentle folk. Now, what does it mean when a man who does not fit the Bhattacharya imagination of Bengaliness refuses to disappear? This presentation examines how this rejection reveals the unfinished nature of decolonization and the crisis of elite legitimacy in the digital sphere using the framework of Chen's Asia's method. Okay. Now moving on to the question of what is Bengaliness. The idea of Bengaliness as it is popularly understood is not a natural or pre-existing cultural essence, but rather a historically constructed identity. Shaped by the intellectual and aesthetic interventions of the Bhattacharya class, like I mentioned before. The Bengali Renaissance played a very crucial role in this process as elite Bengali intellectuals influenced by the British education, Enlightenment rationalism, and Victorian moral values sought to define the Bengali identity through a mix of pre-colonial heritage and colonial modernity. The Bhattacharya, so here, who the roles of the Bhattacharya? So these were see if you look at the PPT, you'll be able to understand. So, they were the upper caste, like I mentioned before, educated and economically privileged Bengalis, and they curated Bengaliness by promoting literature, classical music, and a refined linguistic register. And Bengaliness became synonymous with Bhattacharya values. Intellectualism, literary sophistication, artistic refinement, and an aspiration towards European aesthetic ideals. Now, this is where Chen's Asia's method becomes very relevant here. His argument in Asia's method helps us understand this process as a contradictory movement. But the Bengali Renaissance was a response to the British colonial rule. It was structurally dependent on Western derived frameworks of modernity, taste, and cultural value. Now, the Bengali identity is not an organic identity, but a carefully curated Bhattacharya project, which continues to function as a marker of class distinction and cultural gatekeeping. Now, the middle class identity in Bengal has never been purely economic. It is deeply cultural. The norms governing this identity were not self-regulated and self-generated, but were instead shaped by an earlier generation of educated elites whose worldview was significantly influenced by the British ideals about civility, refinement, and proper public behavior. Now, Hero Alom, regardless of his financial standing, lacks the social and cultural capital required to be accepted as a legitimate Bengali cultural figure. His exclusion, then, is not about musical ability, which many argue that he doesn't have. But then it's not just about that alone, but it's also about those who are granted the ability or the legitimacy to embody and carry forward the elite cultural traditions. So if you look at this, so this was an article about Hero Alom on the New York Post. So there were certain, comments about how he's too ugly, and that's what they, copied and then. So too ugly to sing, cops make off-key Bangladesh singer sign apology. So I'll just give a little bit of context about this. So he made a video about Rabindranath Tagore, and like he sang a cover of one of his songs, and apparently it was too off-key, and it had infuriated a certain class of people, certain Bengali people, and then what they did was they complained against him. They not only complained against this video to YouTube. Of course, it was taken down. But after that, they even filed a police complaint, and after that, he was served a legal notice as well. Now, so therefore, policing Hero Alom, like I said, is literally policing. He was. So also reveals the classist underpinnings of those who is allowed to be the spokesperson of Bengali culture and who isn't. So my next question is, what happens when the wrong person becomes famous? So the rejection of Hero Alom is not merely a rejection of bad taste. It is also a post-colonial anxiety about global perception. The Bhadralok imagination of Bengaliness, shaped by colonial modernity, has always been deeply concerned with how Bengal is viewed by the world. So a few examples is, before I go into that, so he borrows from Bhojpuri pop and then Bollywood, and so local folk forms also. And most importantly, he calls himself hero. He just confers the title unto himself, and he just says that he is Hero Alom. And so that's very interesting. I'll come to that a little later. So during the colonial period, Bhadralok intellectuals positioned Bengal as the most cultured part of India, a place of literary brilliance, scientific rationality, and artistic genius. Even after decolonization, Bengali elites continued to evaluate themselves through a westernized gaze, ensuring the Bengali high culture remained aligned with global, which is, of course, European standards of refinement. And his rejection proves that elite structures of aesthetic and political legitimacy remain in place. This is precisely what Chen means by decolonization being incomplete. And formal independence, although formal independence has been achieved, but the ways in which value, taste, and respectability are defined remain tied to colonial structures. So I have curated some screenshots. So is it visible?
Are you getting it? Okay.
Yes, they are.
Okay. So I've also provided translations along with that. So these are the kinds of comments that you will find if you just scroll through the comment section of Hero Alom's videos. So why did my Wi-Fi not go away before listening to the song? Many thanks to the creator that I'm alive after listening to the song. And even after 10 years, those who search and listen to the song, I respect their taste. And this is a very literal translation that I've done. And so the fourth one is, after hearing your song, the population of Bangladesh will be halved in a few days. So anyway, now that brings me to the, just a minute. Yeah, the next part, which is the appropriation of subaltern culture. Now, elite-controlled cultural institutions have often incorporated elements of subaltern expressions while stripping them of the original social, political, and effective force. Folk traditions, dialects, and street performances, and even food traditions in India and Bengal were often repackaged into classical or high art forms, while erasing the working class and caste-based origins. And so Bengali elites promoted a Sanskritized, refined version of Bengali language and culture during the colonial period, dismissing, like I said, regional dialects and folk traditions. And for example, Baul music and then Dalit literature So Baul music it's basically a sort of a Bengali folk music. And then all of these were later absorbed into mainstream cultural institutions, but only in a sanitized and elite-approved form. So historical expressions of subalternity were first erased or dismissed and then selectively appropriated by elites but before being popularized. And so why is the case of Hero Alom different? Alom's trajectory disrupts this pattern. He gains visibility first because the digital space allows creators like him to bypass elite gatekeeping using digital affordances to amass significant public engagement. And Alom's virality creates a crisis of legitimacy. In the digital space, elite discourse co-opts viral vernacular digital performances by framing them as comic relief or exotic oddities. And Hero Alom as a figure is largely constructed by commentary that defines him as a spectacle rather than a serious cultural figure. Now, okay, so this is my final slide. And now, cringe in this context is, of course, not merely an aesthetic judgment, but a political act that marks boundaries of cultural legitimacy. His presence in the digital public sphere mimics older patterns of appropriation, where subaltern agency is acknowledged only within the framework of elite entertainment. And Alom's case is emblematic of a long history of appropriation. His presence in the digital public sphere marks a rupture, yet his position is constantly negotiated through elite frameworks of legitimacy and aesthetic judgment. His rise to fame, driven by logarithmic virality rather than elite validation, challenges traditional cultural hierarchies that have historically mediated who gets to be visible in a public discourse. And the question then is not just about visibility, but about who controls the discourse, defines legitimacy, and sets the terms for engagement.
Thank you so much, Diyali. We'll move on, I guess, to Trio and Avishek for their contribution. Thank you so much, Diyali.